Hi, everyone. It's Janice from the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm excited to tell you that my book is now for sale. It's called Divorcing Religion, a memoir and survival handbook. And I'll make sure you have a link in the notes for that. And also, I want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and become a member of my YouTube channel. Take care. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm your host, Janice SELBIE. I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious trauma recovery coach. My guest today is Melody Post. Melody was a member of the House of Yahweh Cult from 1989 to 1994. During that time, she married the leader's son and gave birth to a child within the group, assisted only by midwives, having never seen a doctor during her pregnancy. She left in 1994 when the leader, who was her father-in-law, introduced polygamy into the teachings after being caught cheating on his wife. Today, Melody co-hosts and helps produce the Cultimatum podcast, where she shares her story and helps provide a platform for other cult and trafficking survivors to speak out, raise awareness, and support one another in healing from coercive control and spiritual abuse. Melody is also the founder and creator of the Cult Escape and Healing Group on Facebook, a supportive online community with over 2,000 members for survivors of cults and high control groups to connect, share resources, and find understanding as they rebuild their lives after leaving. And you can look for the links for Melody's resources in today's show notes. Welcome, Melody. I'm so glad that you could join me on the Divorcing Religion podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Janice. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to our conversation. So
I'm always interested in hearing about people's experiences, especially when they do feel free to label their high demand group as a cult, because we know that's not the case for everybody. Not everyone feels comfortable using that word for whatever reason. I know that you do. And I'm wondering if you would even take us back to your childhood at all to tell us about, did you grow up in religion? I mean, how did you end up entering into a high demand cult?
that's a very good question. I'm going to go back just a tad because I don't want to forget to say this, but I am going to say I couldn't always call it a cult. So, and I understand where people are coming from, because when you're in a cult, you don't call it a cult. Nobody joins a cult. You don't know it's a cult. And it takes a lot of deconstruction to get to the point where you're like, when you finally realize it and you look back, you're like, oh my gosh, it was a cult. And that can be very traumatizing when you figure that out. But it can also bring a lot of awareness. So, and that can help with the healing. When you realize that this is calculated and that there is almost like a playbook that these cult leaders use to do this, and that they target people. So I will go back then into my past now, and we'll start with my childhood. Originally, my parents were not very religious in my early childhood. And I would say I was maybe 8 to 10 years old when we started going to a more Christian-based church and a non-denominational church. And we went for a couple of years, and it was because my parents were having marriage problems, and my uncle was in this church, and he convinced my mom and dad to join them. And I wouldn't say we had a particularly negative experience with that, but I will say that there were some things that happened that were shocking to my parents. Like there was some of the other members that they were close friends with, they found out were doing spouse swapping, and my parents were just a little bit taken aback and shocked at this behavior. And I think that was part of the reason that we ended up leaving that church. And then I think that that triggered my dad to be on this quest to find the truth. And all cults claim to have the truth, right? They all have the truth. So
and she's using her air quotes for anyone who's listening. She's got air quotes around the truth.
Yes, exactly. Because it's like a buzzword, and they all like to use it. We have the truth, or the way, or whatever, So I think that got my dad on the quest looking for that. And he was doing that with a cousin of his who had lots of booklets and pamphlets from lots of different religious groups that he had apparently contacted and had them mail propaganda. I'm going to call it propaganda. I'm going to call it what it was. And my dad ended up with one of the House of Yahweh propaganda books. And it was, I think it was called The Name of God or something, or The Name of the Creator. It was The Name of the Creator. And basically the whole booklet was saying, if you're praying to God, basically you're praying to the devil. And that the real name of God is Yahweh. And if you don't pray to Yahweh, that your prayers aren't being heard. And that this was the answer. This is why. If your life's a mess, this is why your life's a mess. And we know how to fix.
Just let me break in there, because if that doesn't, absolutely fit in with what I think makes us so vulnerable to having our brains hijacked, is this addiction to certainty that humans have. And so then your dad tried, your parents tried this one thing, and then that, that didn't really work for them. There were some elements that they didn't like, but he really wanted to know, someone has the truth. Someone must have the truth out there. Who is it? And so then he gets his hands on this booklet that is so in your face. So I have the right way and you're doing it wrong if you're not doing it my way. And the writer sounds very certain, and we're craving certainty. So thank you for letting me get in there, get on my little soapbox there about certainty.
No, exactly. And that's what I say. I think that is part of the reason that, I call myself agnostic now. And part of the reason that, I leave the door open for the possibility there may be something out there that I'm not aware of, but I certainly don't believe in organized religion or anything like that anymore. But I will say that part of that is that I am okay now saying there's a lot of things I don't know. I'm not certain, and that's okay. And it took me a long time to get there, because when you're in a cult, there's something reassuring about believing, even if it's not true, that you have all the answers, and saying, oh, I know the answer to this. I know the answer to that. And then they program you to actually be able to provide those answers to specific questions that other people come to you with. And so you have all these pre-programmed answers. So you sound almost like a little robot, right? But you feel so empowered by saying, oh, I know the answer to that. And I know the answer to this. And you really get kind of arrogant, and you think you have all the answers. And when that comes crumbling down at the beginning stages, you're lost. I remember the first time that I was supposed to work on a Saturday after leaving, and I had literally had a breakdown. I had a panic attack because I believed, oh my gosh, if I go to work today, I'm going to go to hell.
So you saw Saturday as the Sabbath.
Saturday was the Sabbath. Yes, they did a lot of Jewish teachings, a lot of Jewish beliefs from the Old Testament of the Bible.
And yes, and I feel that is very popular with a lot of Christian groups. It's almost to me like there is an element of envy that is felt for the Jewish people because they believe them to be God's chosen people. There's my air quotes. And so they try and commandeer the Jewish traditions and teachings while still holding on to their belief about Jesus or about Yahweh. Would you please then tell us, what was it like then? Your parents, they pulled you out of the one church. Had you been there many years or just a few years?
I think it was just a couple of years. I think we were only there for a couple of years. And I think we did very, very shortly go to another church. I kind of can picture in my mind. And I think it was called like the Cornerstone Church or something, which is a pretty common name. And I think that was another just small little denomination. But I can only remember going there a handful of times. It did not last very long. And honestly, I really don't know why that didn't work out. I really don't. I guess I've never asked. I could ask my mom. My dad's now passed, but I could ask my mom at some point. But I don't know why we left that one. But we were that was only a handful of times. And then I was 14 when we joined the House of Yahweh, and I actually latched onto it quicker than even my sister. I my dad was reading parts of the booklet. I was reading parts of it myself independently. And I think for me, it was because I was young. I was 13.
Mhm.
Well, I think I just turned 14, but I was having sex with my boyfriend and my parents didn't know. And I was having a lot
Oh,
of guilt
wow.
about that. And I
Yeah.
think that this was an answer for me to, first of all, think that I was going to be forgiven for that because I
Sure.
believed that I had sinned. And then I think it was also a way for me, it actually gave me a conduit for breaking up with that boyfriend because there was a lot of
Yes.
unhealthy
Yes.
elements in that
Sure.
relationship too. So I
Right.
think that
Yeah.
is a lot of the reason that I latched onto it. My sister was a little more reserved. She was 2 years younger than me, and she did not embrace it as quickly as my parents and I did.
Well, and at 14, you're also really starting to try to figure out your own identity. At 11 or 12, you're still more, especially at 11, maybe, you're still more happier to be under your parents' authority and whatever
Yes.
they believe is fine with you. But by the time you're 14, yeah, you're starting to go, well, and because you also then had already begun that sexual portion of your life too.
Yes.
So that also is more of an independence, breaking away from the parents. So it makes sense to me
Yeah.
at 14 that you were looking at things and trying to decide for yourself, yeah, I think this does seem the right thing, exploring it
Yes.
on your own. So then you were sucked into it a little more quickly than your sibling was. And so were the
Yes.
services markedly different? I mean, you mentioned
Oh,
they
for sure.
followed Saturday as a Sabbath. Were
They
they
did.
also much more traditional and kind of like uptight in how they did things?
Very much so. And it got even more strict after we left because obviously we left when they started the polygamy teaching, as you read in my introduction. But no, they were definitely much more strict. My dad went down there by himself first, and just to kind of scout out the place before he would felt comfortable bringing my mom and his children there, his wife and children.
Was it in
So
another location?
it was. It was. We lived in the state of Michigan, and this cult was located in Abilene, Texas, at
Wow.
that time. So it was quite a drive. So my dad drove down there by himself. Um, I swear, I think it was in February. I'm pretty sure it was winter months that he drove down there to just stake it out before we went to a feast because they kept the Feast of the Old Testament, which is Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles. And so we were driving down there. I'm the only one who ever moved down to the base of the cult. The rest of my family always lived in Michigan and only came for those 3 feasts 3 times a year. I lived down there for 2 years before moving back to Michigan. And I think, because I've talked to my mom a little bit about that, because I remember she had a kind of a surprise reaction to my panic attack over the Saturday working thing. And I think in hindsight, I wasn't able to articulate this at the time it was happening. But I think in hindsight, I think I was a lot more indoctrinated. I think I was a lot more brainwashed than my family
Right.
because I was down there for 2 years getting that day to day, week after week indoctrination that they weren't experiencing. So
And
I
how
think
old were you when you moved there?
I was 18 when I moved down there,
Okay.
and got married, and then I left when I was 20. So
Okay. So in the years, from 14 to 18, you're introduced to it at 14. Would you and your family drive to Texas 3 times a year for these different feast
yes.
days? And then the rest of the time, were you still attending public school, but your dad was leading some kind of service in your home on Saturdays, or what was going on there?
That describes it almost to a T. Exactly. Yes. We still attended public school, my sister and I. We we weren't allowed to participate. Like we couldn't go to Friday night football games. We couldn't do anything on Saturday, no Saturday activities. So yes, Saturdays we still were keeping the Sabbath, but it was just in our home. Occasionally there was a small group that was also in Wisconsin. Occasionally we would drive to Wisconsin in between the feast, and have services with a small group in Wisconsin. But mostly it was just us in our home. And of course, what were we doing at that time? It was cassette tapes. So you bought cassette
Oh,
tapes
yeah.
of the sermons. So usually we were listening to the sermon from the week before or possibly 2 weeks before. We'd get them in the
Yeah.
mail, and then that's what we would listen to on the
Were you
Saturdays.
changing your appearance? Did you and your sister suddenly have to start wearing skirts, or did your friend group change? Like what was going on that way?
My friend group did not change. And I will say, our appearance, I would say, changed slightly because there was a dress code, but it was not as strict as it became. At that time, you couldn't wear, I think it was shorts that were above the knee. So basically kind of like pedal pushers or capri shorts is what we could wear. So I mean, and since we've left, the women all can't wear pants at all. They have to all wear long skirts. And for a while now, I don't know if they're still doing this because their doctrine changes with the wind. Honestly, and the leader has since died. So they're now, last I heard, being led by a group of 12 elders on a board. But the last I knew, the women had to cover everything. They had to wear skirts down to the ankle. They had to cover all the way down to the wrist. They had to wear gloves. They had to wear a face mask. They had to wear a headscarf. So, and we did have to wear a headscarf, but only in the sanctuary when we were there. But it became much more strict after we left. And the women definitely were much more oppressed after we left. The polygamy really it turned especially young girls into almost a commodity.
Wow.
To where I
Yes.
know of deals being made where young girls were being traded for vehicles.
Oh my
I mean,
God.
human trafficking type stuff.
Horrifying.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Wow. So you were able to keep your essentially your friend group at school. You had some limitations. You couldn't do the Friday night stuff.
Right.
Saturday was spent at home. And then at some point you were sucked in even deeper than the rest of the family, because at 18 you decide to go and live there, and that must be, I'm guessing around when you started seeing the leader's son, or you were set up with the leader's son. How did that happen? And did your parents mind that at 18 you decided you were going to move away to Texas?
Okay. I was betrothed to the leader's son at the age of 16. Wow. My parents were okay with that, but honestly, I think had my dad not been a little bit more stern and said that I was not going to be allowed to get married until I got my high school diploma, I probably would have been married at 16. Mm-hmm. The only reason I wasn't is, and I will say that I actually even though my dad is the one who enforced it, I give my grandfather credit for that. Because at that time, my dad worked for his father, who was my grandfather. So they were together on a daily basis. And my grandfather valued education highly. And I think my dad knew if he did not at least have me get my high school diploma before he allowed me to get married, he would have never heard the end of it from my grandfather. So, I think he was just like, I think in order to keep the peace with my dad, I cannot let her do this until she graduates. So I'm very grateful for that. Very grateful that I finished my high school education, got my diploma. My dad I think my dad had started seeing cracks in the religion before I got married. Because I do remember at one point he had said to me, you know, when you move down there that Mr. Hawkins is going to try to control every aspect of your life. And I looked at him and I was kind of puzzled. And then I said, why? Why would you think that? We're going to be 18. We're going to be adults and we can do what we want, like an 18-year-old would, right? Because because you're clueless and you're arrogant and you haven't learned enough in life. I thought he was nuts. But boy, did he hit the nail on the head. There was so much control when we moved down there, unbelievable amounts of control. And I'll give you an example is that my husband and I lived on a trailer on the farm property of my father-in-law. He had a farmhouse there. And from his window where his office was, he could see our trailer house. And he had asked us at one point why our lights were on past 10 p.m. And we were like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't even know. We're probably watching TV or something, right? And he's like, well, you two need to be in bed by 10 p.m. And just so you know, for every night that I see your lights on past 10 p.m., your paycheck is going to be docked by $10. Now, mind you, we only made $120 together a week. So we were both being paid below minimum wage. For years.
And what were you doing?
What were we doing? You mean?
Work?
Oh, my husband at that time did some of the farm work, but he also worked in the press room, helping to create the propaganda, print it out, and staple it together. I started out working in the office with my mother-in-law, and I was actually helping to duplicate the sermon tapes and then mail them out as people would order them, put them in the envelopes, and get them ready to be shipped out. So we were basically working for the cult, helping with the propaganda and doing the work of Yahweh, air quotes again.
Right. And for very little pay, because that's how cults operate. Slave labor.
Absolutely. And for years, I had thought that we were both making $60 a week. I had later found out that no, my husband was making $80 a week because he was a man, and I was making $40 a week because I was a woman. So men got paid twice as much as women, but both below minimum wage. So that's one example of his controlling behavior. Another example would be that he one time found out that we were working for a farm down the road. We had seen a sign that they were looking for people to help muck their horse stalls. And so I think it was for like $50 a week. And so we went to the farm and they hired us to muck their stalls 3 days a week. We were going, I think, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And my father-in-law found out about it. And he called my husband into his office and said, I heard you're working for the farm down the road, and what are you making? And he told him that we were making $50 a week doing that. And he said, well, your pay is officially docked by $50 a week until you quit working for them, because he wanted to be the only one in control of our finances. He did not want us to have any other source of income. So it became it wasn't financially advantageous for us to continue doing that other job, right? Because we were going to have the same amount of money at the end of the week for doing more work. So was that a conversation then between you and your new husband? And I want to go back even again before you married him. Were you excited to be marrying this person? He was the same age as you, was he? He was a little younger, actually. He was almost, I'm going to say 10 months younger than me. So when we got married, he was actually only 17. I think about that now. I have 3 sons. I think about when they were 17 and think none of them would have been ready to be married at 17. None of them.
Was he the only child of the leader?
He was not. He was his only blood son at that time. He had some stepsons because my mother-in-law, when they got married, she had 3 children, and then they had 2 children together.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I had a sister-in-law that was also his daughter, his blood daughter, and then they had 3. So they raised 5 children together.
Okay.
2 of which were theirs.
So there was, or was there no questioning father-in-law's behavior? You know, when your husband at the time came to you and said, well, Dad says he's going to dock our paycheck. I mean, did you guys have a reaction to that?
Yes, I thought it was ludicrous. I'm just like, this is crazy. Like, who does this? I could not wrap my brain around it. And my husband just said, this is the way my dad is. You have to get used to it. You have to do what he says. He means what he says. And there's no point in us keeping this job. So we had to quit. So he knew. Oh. I mean, but he was indoctrinated from birth, right? He knew what the rules were, and he knew that.
Did your parents know that when you told them? Like, did you ever tell them about, this is going on or that's
You
going
know,
on?
I don't remember if I told them, and I don't remember their reaction. I can't say, so I'm going to say I either didn't tell them, I maybe, or they just didn't. We didn't have much of a conversation or reaction to that. So, but yeah, that was another that's pretty pretty controlling. That's pretty controlling
Yes.
behavior. And it was certainly, I think, and I'd seen red flags even before that. Some of the red flags that I had seen was I was quite close with my husband's sister, the youngest sister. So the other sister that was also the daughter of Israel Hawkins, who was the leader. She has since taken her life, and I just going to say that I think that a lot of that had to do with a lot of the abuse she suffered at the hands of Israel Hawkins, a lot of the indoctrination. I think she just had a lot. It was a lot. It was too much for her. And but her and I were friends. And so I'd stayed there one summer and I was staying with her. And there was a time when they had gotten punished for buying food for a party at the private school, and because he didn't know they were buying the food, and he took them out back and he was burning the food. I was in the bedroom watching from the window.
Oh my God.
As he was doing this, he had them on their knees. He's burning the food in the fire pit, and he's hitting them on the back of the head, telling them they're going to hell, they're sinners, they're horrible. How could they do this? And that this was against Yahweh. And I'm just like, they bought food.
Wow.
What are we talking about here? But I think I think because what my husband had done, and he was my boyfriend at the time, but they bought the food, they left it outside. And I was like, why are we leaving it outside? Well, because we don't want our dad to see it. Because he knew his dad would have a reaction to this. And once his dad found it, then he burned it. Then it was supposed to be for an end of school year party. Yes. And so the next day we all went to the party. And guess what? His mother had talked to him because my husband went to his mother, told him what had happened. And so Israel Hawkins, what does he do? He shows up at the school the next day and looks like the savior because he comes with all this food and replaces all this food. And I'm thinking, and everyone's just thinking he's this great guy. And I'm like, I know why he's doing this. And I'm thinking, he's not a great guy. He's a terrible guy. And that was even before I got married. And there was part of me that thought, should I go through with this marriage? Is this the right thing to do? Is this the right idea? But by then, I mean, their teaching was that if you were betrothed, you could not get out of a marriage without, basically, you were betrothed to that person. And if you did not marry that man, you could not marry for the rest of your life. Once you were betrothed, you were that man's woman. And you can't get out of that. That is a lifelong contract. And that I would be single and I would never be able to get married. And I wanted to be a mother. And I thought that, well, I can't, if this is my religion and this is what I believe, I don't have a way out.
Hey, it's Janice. Did you know it cost me $35 to produce and edit every single Divorcing Religion podcast episode? I need your help financially to continue. So if you support my work, please like, subscribe, and become a member on either my YouTube channel or Patreon. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Wow. And so did the leader ever try and discipline you, or did your husband, and by that I mean actually harming you physically, laying their hands on you? And if you do not feel comfortable answering that, please don't.
No, he never did. He never laid hands on me. I know that he laid hands on his children. I don't think he did that after we were married that I'm aware of. But I know that he was very abusive to his children. His daughter had shared stories with me. So
okay, all right, thank you so much. That's exactly what I was wondering. If the children saw his behavior as abuse, and did they ever talk to anyone about it? So you're saying at least the daughter had mentioned to you some of the things that he had done. Yes. Were you watching the relationship between the leader and his wife at all and thinking, oh my God, that's going to be, my husband, me?
Well, a little bit, but at that time, I wasn't seeing a lot of red flags. But he didn't spend a lot of time at home because he was, lo and behold, we did not know at the time, having an affair with his secretary. So
Oh my.
that is why he started teaching the polygamy, because when he got caught and that came to light, he was like, I would never sin. I have done nothing wrong. She is just another wife and a concubine, and this is going to be okay for all men in the house of Yahweh from now on. That was
It
why
was
he
like a
changed.
revelation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. Oh, so maddening, just despicable, and right out of the cult leader's handbook. We see
Yes.
these things happening again and
Yes.
again because it is very much about power and control.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I don't know what it is, but so many of these cults, I mean, in doing the interviews for Cultimatum, I am shocked at how many of these cults and groups that it becomes about sex and power. I don't know how or why, but and money, power, money, and sex. It's always about
Mhm.
either all of those things, some of those things, or at least one of those things.
Yes, yes. Well, so then um, you graduated from high school, and then I'm guessing your husband did. This was a year-end party that you were describing
Yes.
some of the food for. Then, how long until you got pregnant?
6 months. Within 6 months of the marriage, I was pregnant. Um, and I think I was 52 days late for my period, which had never happened to me. I was 99% sure I was pregnant. And I was going to get a test. And my husband said, "Boy, I sure hope you're not pregnant. I'm not ready to be a dad." I'm like, well, fine
Oh,
time to say that. And
no,
I just,
not very
and I,
helpful.
and I will say that I do think that was almost the beginning of the end of our relationship. I don't think, I think he felt trapped at that point. I think he did leave with me. Our marriage did not last much longer after that, but we did leave together. Actually, the sister that I was friends with and her husband and my husband and myself and my mother-in-law all got excommunicated for not complying with the polygamy teaching. We all got our excommunication letters on the same day.
Well,
So
okay. So then it was this after you had the baby?
yes, it was after I had the baby. The baby, I'm going to say he was about maybe 8, 9 months old at that time. So,
Okay, so
yeah.
how did it even come to light that the great leader was carrying on, behind his wife's back, was having this affair? How did that come to light? And then kind of what happened? How did he go about explaining to everyone that actually it wasn't a sin, it was just a revelation, all men are supposed to do this?
That is an interesting story and a great question. Actually, the woman herself who was having the affair, who believed herself to be another wife, called my mother-in-law and said, "Oh, by the way, I'm Israel's other wife, in case you didn't know." So she revealed it because I think she was sick of keeping the secret. And my mother-in-law was devastated, as you can imagine. She was
Yeah.
devastated because, I mean, this had become her whole life. She was doing a lot of the research for the books and the booklets. And I think she believed it fervently with her whole heart. She believed this religion. And he just basically told her that he wasn't going to be her dog on a chain and she needed to follow this teaching or she was going to be pushed to the side. And she ended up filing for divorce ultimately.
Wow.
And there was a time when there was a time when I thought I had to accept this, right? It wasn't like I immediately just said, "No, I'm not doing this." There was that a fight inside of me of, well, this is my religion and this is what I believe, so I have to accept this. And so I had these moments where I'd be like, I have to accept this. And then I would think about, first of all, the idea of sharing my husband. I'm just like, I'm a pretty jealous person. I don't really know that I can do that. And then seeing the pain that my mother-in-law was going through was another thing, pulling me in that other direction. Like, I'm just like, what creator would put anybody through this kind of pain? This does not make sense to me.
What was your husband saying then? Because he was watching this destroy his parents' marriage, but he
Yes.
also was raised to believe his dad was God's mouthpiece.
He was, but he definitely had a lot more. I think he had a closer relationship with his mother, and he had a lot more, I'm going to say, respect for his mother. And I think that he kind of teetered back and forth too. I mean, we all did it, but I will say that I do think that we were being listened to, because by the time that we got the excommunication papers, we had that evening sat in my mother-in-law's living room and discussed that we weren't going to go to the next Sabbath service, that we were going to have our own Sabbath service at the house, because we didn't agree with what was being brought across the pulpit. And lo and behold, that same night we get our excommunication papers. I think that house was bugged, and I think they were listening to everything they said. And they were like, "You can't quit. We're going to fire you."
Wow. And had you been in contact with your parents then and let them know? Because
Yes.
they would have been 2 weeks late finding out, because they were getting it from cassette tapes.
Well, I called them. I called them right away. So I did call them before they got the cassette tape, and just, hey, by the way, this is coming out. And my mother immediately said, "We're done. We're done. We're not going back. We're not accepting that." And then they didn't quite leave right away. They did come to the next feast. And I remember my mother confronting my husband and asking him, "Do you intend on getting another wife?" And his response was, "Not at this time." And my mother's response was, "Wrong answer, wrong answer. When I agreed to let you marry my daughter, it was that she was going to be your one and only wife. This was not part of the teaching when we agreed to let you marry her, and this is not fair." So
wow.
they were, and my dad was not agreeing with it. He got into some arguments with some of the elders during the feast, and they probably would have ended up ultimately getting excommunicated as well. But I think as soon as I was excommunicated, they knew they were done. They knew. I think part of the reason they were staying is because I was still there, because I lived down there. I was married down there. I think they were trying to figure out, how do we leave and not lose our daughter?
Were they encouraging you to leave?
They were not quite at that time. And I think it's because I think they knew, because of the way the teaching was, had they started doing that, I would have had to cut communication with them. So I think they were, especially my dad, was trying to very subtly encourage critical thinking, but not be overly critical, which is a fine line to walk when you are, because that is the one question I get asked so many times between the Cult Escape and Healing Group and Cultimatum podcast is people, that's the hardest question to ask, is people, when people come to you and ask, "My friend's in a cult, my brother's in a cult, my mom's in a cult, my aunt's in a cult, how do I get them out?" Mm-hmm. I wish there was a magic word. I wish there was this magic sentence you could say that would snap them out of that brainwashing, and they would just go, "Oh, you're right." But there's not. It's a process, and you have to respect the fact that they believe it so strongly at that point. You need to, what I do is encourage people to keep that door of communication open always. Yes. Don't say anything too critical of the group or too critical of the leader. Really almost don't say anything critical. More like ask a lot of questions. Like, yes. Like, how do you feel about that? How do you, because that's something that nobody really cares about when you're in a cult. They don't care how you feel about anything. So it's almost like when you ask them, how do you feel about that? They have to, it's almost a shocking question to them. Like, well, it doesn't matter how I feel about it, right? But they have to they have to get out of that robotic brainwashing thought pattern and think, well, how do I feel about this? Which requires that critical thinking part of your brain to start lighting up and say, wait a minute, I got to think about this. How do I feel about that? And I know that everybody wants that magic answer, right? That magic answer to where if you just say abracadabra, and then they'll wake up and they'll be like, oh, this is a cult. You're right. I'm leaving. And we liken it to, and we do talk about this on the podcast as well, that it's a lot like somebody in an abusive relationship. They
Yes.
believe that they're in that relationship, and they believe that their love can change that person. And really, until they see it for what it is and decide they're ready to leave and get out of that toxic situation, you have the same thing. You have to leave that door of communication over. You can't be too critical. You have to walk on
Yes.
eggshells, and you have to encourage
And
critical thinking.
yes, yes, I love it. The things you're saying are so powerful. And I also want our audience today to recognize as well that if you think of someone who has an addiction to
Yes.
smoking, say, or maybe to sweet foods, and so they want to lose weight or they want to quit smoking, they may have to quit several times, or like
Yes.
leaving an abusive spouse. They may have to do this several times before it actually sticks, or before they actually can manage it. And actually, in my book, Divorcing Religion, I talk about how people can be addicted to religion or to their cult. And so instead of ACOA, adult children of alcoholics, I talk about acorns, adult children of religious nuts. And it actually can take us quite a while to break free from that. And so we have to be able to give our loved ones time and space and as much understanding as we can muster, keeping that door open, like you say, refraining from ever name calling.
Yes.
That's stupid. That's a cult. You're
Yes.
brainwashed. I mean, yes, these things may all be true, but it will not be helpful at all to say them, but instead just gently encouraging, like you said,
Yes.
asking, how do they feel? And potentially at times even reminiscing about our life, our experiences together with that person, joyful experiences
Yes.
before they joined the cult. Just reminding them there was life before this group, and it actually was pretty great. And there can be life after. But so we might be their lifeline. We might be the only person who hasn't closed the door, and we want them to think of us when they do make that decision, when they say, I've got to leave, that they know they can reach out to us and they'll be received and welcomed and accepted.
100%. Exactly. That's why you leave that door of communication open, so they know they have that lifeline out there, that there's someone they can call, someone they can reach out to, whether it's a Facebook message or a text message or a phone call or just literally just showing up at somebody's door. They know that somebody is out there willing to help them. That's important, because a cult will tell you they're not. Nobody's going to be there. And that your life is just going to crumble to bits and everything's just going to go to hell in a handbasket if you leave. That's the fear tactics. That's the fear tactics that help keep you in. But I'm glad you said that, Janice, about the, I'm going to go back to my panic attack when I was ready, when I thought I had to work on the Saturday. And there was that moment when I was having that panic attacks. I can picture it, sitting on my parents' stairway that goes up to the upstairs crying. And I remember thinking, maybe I should go back. Maybe if I just go back, this anxiety will subside. I just need to go back and I'll feel better. I won't have this panic in me, because there was something comforting about somebody telling me what to do and telling me what was going to save me. And I think that had I not went back to Michigan and I was still closer to the cult, I may have went back. But I was, 1,500 miles away. It wasn't easy for me to just go back. So, and I did try to seek counseling, but this was in 1993. There was not a lot of information on this topic. And certainly I was in northern Michigan. There was not anybody in the area who would have had any knowledge or experience with religious trauma. So
and the internet was in its infancy.
Exactly. No, exactly. And that's the awesome thing. I love that we have the internet and the ability to do remote counseling. That is, to me, such an amazing tool for people who need that nowadays. I had to go through all this and figure it all out myself. I mean, I tried going to a counselor. that man looked at me like I had three eyes when I was in there. And I'm like, he has no idea how to help me. He may have wanted to help me, but I could tell he was looking at me like, I don't even know what to do for you, lady. You've got a lot going on. You've got a lot on your plate. And I was just like, this isn't going to be very helpful. So I read a lot of self-help books is what I did. That was my counseling.
Can you tell us about, so you and your husband at the time, and then the sister-in-law and her husband and your mother-in-law, so you guys all essentially received your eviction notices from the church, or you were kicked out of the church. So then at some point you had to move off the property because your father-in-law owned this property. So did you and your husband and the baby all leave at once, or what happened?
Okay, so actually, my mother-in-law did end up getting that property in the divorce. And initially, we were not going to move to Michigan, although I missed my family terribly. But basically what had happened is that I knew there was a lot of spying going on. I was pretty sure that my mother-in-law's home was bugged. I wasn't convinced that our home wasn't bugged. I knew that we were being watched from across the field. There were houses over there that he owned. I knew we were being watched. And then the straw that broke the camel's back for me was I had a friend who also did not believe in the polygamy teaching. And she lived on the property and she was trying to sell her trailer, could not get a fair price. So she was staying there. And they ended up burning her trailer down. Now, that was under investigation and it was never proven that it was an arson fire. I just know from my father-in-law had said that he knew how to start fires where people wouldn't know it was arson because he was a police officer. He had this knowledge, and he
was a police officer.
Oh, he had been a police officer in Abilene before. Yes, he was a cop before he started this religion. So I was convinced that he had burned her trailer down. Her dog was inside that trailer. I went back there with her to try to collect anything that was salvageable. And you could see the little spot on the carpet where the smoke didn't damage it because her dog had died there. Oh, that's when I became scared. And I went home that day and told my husband, the baby and I are moving back to Michigan. You're welcome to join us, but I can't stay here anymore because your father is capable of much more terrifying things than I ever could have imagined. And I do not feel safe. I do not feel that my child is safe. And I can't sleep here. I can't sleep at night. Luckily, he was looking for an escape too. I think he wanted a way out of there. And he did come with me. And that was probably within just maybe a few weeks of us getting the excommunication. We ended up moving up to Michigan.
So you were in your early 20s now?
Yes. I'm actually, exactly 20 at this time.
Oh my God.
So it just turned 20. So we moved to Michigan together. Our marriage did not last, but less than a year after that. And I can tell you that between doing the podcast and multiple other religions and knowing a lot of people that got married inside of my cult that are now divorced, that I think it's very rare that a marriage can survive that. I like to say that when you're in a cult, you marry cult versions of each other. You don't know who you really are. They don't know who they really are. And then you go through the deconstruction process and everybody's deconstructing their own way at their own pace. And you're figuring out who you are without this group telling you who you are. And you don't even know who you are, let alone who the other person is, let alone if you're compatible. It puts all these dynamics into a marriage that I think is very rare that a marriage can survive that. Our marriage did not.
And so then let's use this opportunity to encourage folks who are listening today. Divorce is not failure. Divorce is transition. Yes. It's simply transition to another part of your life. There's no need to feel shame and guilt and failure. We can look at it just matter-of-factly. Divorce is just a transition because sometimes divorce can save our lives. So it's an important option that must be on the table for people.
And I love that you said that because I will say that my self-esteem took a dive after I went through my divorce. I was just like, oh, I lost my religion. Now I'm losing my husband. I'm losing my family. The religion had basically taught that if you were divorced and a single mom, you're worthless, basically. So I felt very worthless. And I ended up in another abusive relationship. It was short-lived, but I ended up with an admitted alcoholic for a short period of time, less than a year. And then shortly after that, I did find my husband. I've now been married to for almost 30 years. And he was very, very supportive of my deconstruction process, very, very supportive of all of that. I could not have found a better partner. So, thank you to my sister, if she's listening, for setting me up with him. He's just been wonderful. Amazing still. I mean, because I didn't put a Christmas tree in my house for 17 years after leaving. That's how indoctrinated I still was.
Wow. Thank you for saying that.
I now like to put a Christmas tree up on early November and keep it up until February sometimes, because I'm like, I'm making up for lost time, people. I didn't do this for 17 years.
Yes. Wow. And so you then went on to have additional children.
Yes, I did. I had two more boys with my current husband. Yep.
And did you maintain any co-parenting relationship or anything with the father of your first child? Did they move back to Texas, or do you know anything about what happened there?
He stayed in Michigan for a few years. He did ultimately end up back in Texas. Then he joined the military, was in the Army, served 4 years in the Army, overseas a lot of that time. And then ended up back in Texas with his family that was not part of the cult. So he never went back to the cult.
But the cult is still going on today. You mentioned when we started today that the leader is deceased now. He did die, but now there's some group of 12 elders. Of course, they're fashioning themselves after the apostles, I'm sure.
Yes. I think he died in 2021. If I remember right. It might have been 2022, but I believe he died in 2021. And he was like 87 years old. And really, my ex-husband never really had a relationship with his father after that. It dissolved the relationship because, and honestly, I don't think he really cared, because I don't think he cared about if you were going to be there, you had to follow him and follow his rules, and you had to be worshiping him. And ultimately, they had gotten to the point where you couldn't just pray to Yeshua, who was Jesus, and you had to pray through Israel Hawkins to get to Yeshua, to get to Yahweh. So he became, he became your conduit to get to the Creator. So
that isn't a little bit culty.
Yes, exactly. As a matter of fact, they turned all of his sermons into their own version of a Book of Mormon called the Book of Israel, where it's all his sermons, and they've got chapters and verses the way a Bible would, and they now refer to that. Like if you listen to any of their online sermons, you will hear them refer to the Book of Israel, chapter this, or book this, chapter that, like it's a Bible, like it's like what he said is gospel. For sure.
Is it a money-making scheme?
For sure it is. As a matter of fact, part of their scheme, they have an offshoot called Peaceful Solutions that they supposedly sell to schools and around the world. So they'll say Peaceful Solutions about how teaching peace to children will bring peace to the world. And basically their version of peace is following the 613 laws of Yahweh in the Bible. But yeah, they've got all kinds of different money-making schemes. I mean, when we were there, we didn't eat pork. We couldn't eat anything that had pork ingredients, or seafood, or, like the Old Testament rules of the Jewish teaching. But by the time, the last I knew, they have their own restaurant now, which is the only restaurant you're allowed to eat at. They have their own grocery store. You have to buy everything that you can at their grocery store. You can buy a few things from a regular grocery store, but of course, it's all marked up and priced double or triple what it is in a normal grocery store, so they can make money on it. So there's another
still
money.
in Abilene?
It's actually outside of Abilene in a very small town called Clyde, is where the compound is. And a lot more people live directly on the compound than actually did when I was there. They've become more compound based.
Oh, wow. We're
not only
and isolated.
Started having multiple wives, but they started, a lot of the men started going to the Philippines and getting wives and bringing them back.
Oh, no.
And these women, I think, had no idea the oppression and poverty they were going to be living in when they got back here. I mean, most of these women are now living in campers without heat and electricity.
Wow. Wow. And I have to wonder about the age of these so-called women that they are bringing back as well. It's much harder to prove when you're bringing people from another country, another continent, another language.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing. This has just been very interesting. And would you tell us, were there any resources that you came across through the years that helped you kind of untangle all this? And then tell us a little bit about Cultimatum and the work that you're doing now.
Okay. There are some specific resources. I do remember reading a book, and this is my deconstruction process. I'm going to preface this again with saying that I am now agnostic, but at the time, a book called More Jesus, Less Religion did help me, because it was basically, and I will say that is kind of where I don't believe in the Bible per se, or the every word of the Bible, but there are themes in the Bible that I agree with, or that I think are not unhealthy for us, like loving your brother as you love yourself. I think that is a good message. I just think that that's not an unhealthy way to think and be. I think that could benefit all of us, Bible or no Bible.
And it's not only found in Christianity. Exactly.
Right. Exactly. So that was a book that helped me early on, I think, to separate the idea of following rules versus loving each other. So that helped me with that part of my deconstruction. That was a big thing for me back in that early stages of my deconstruction. And I've since read, what is it? The five, I want to say the 5 promises, but that's not what it is. I'm sure you know the book. I would guess the 5 agreements. I think it's agreements.
The 4 agreements.
4 agreements. Oh, is it 4 agreements? Okay.
Right.
That was another book that I read that was helpful.
Okay.
That was later on. That was more recent in my deconstruction. And then Cultimatum is I'm going to say that's still part of my deconstruction process, right?
Yeah.
I think that being able to come on a podcast like yours and share my story is part of the deconstruction. It's the freedom, because when you're in these groups, you are under the control of the group or the leader or the teaching of what you can and can't say to outsiders, all of that stuff. And you feel very muzzled and controlled. And even after you leave, you're scared to speak out. You're scared of what will happen, because you still have some of that brainwashing and indoctrination. And this is part of my freedom of saying, this is my story and I'm going to tell it. And, I know there's people out there that won't like me telling it, but I'm going to tell it. It is my story. And that's okay. And once you get to that point where you get that power back in your hands, it's so, so powerful to be able to tell your story. And I love being able to offer that platform for other people who are looking for that, looking to tell their story. They're like screaming out to the universe, like, this place did this to me and it was real and it happened and it was awful. And, and basically watch out. If you're thinking about going there, watch out. So,
wow.
So yes, I love being able to do that and have that for other people, to give them their, basically hand them the mic and say, what's your story?
Right. And that's the Cultimatum podcast. And then also you have quite a large Facebook group.
Yes. I have. It started off as I'd started a Facebook group just for House of Yahweh members originally. And that's still a fairly small, by small, I mean like 200 or 300 people in that group. And that's still there. That's a private group. But I actually had another friend that sadly committed suicide after he had left the House of Yahweh as well, but he dealt with a lot of addiction and stuff after leaving. And he died. He died of an overdose, possibly purposefully. I'm not really sure. We're not really sure, but overdose addiction. And that was in 2020. And that was when I was like, I want to do more. I don't feel like I'm doing enough, even though I had the support group. And so I was like, I think I need to reach out beyond the House of Yahweh, because these cults all work so similar that even though our story is different, that there are so many ways in which I felt connected to people from other cults that had left, that I was like, I would hear their story and I'm like, oh my gosh, my cult taught the 144,000. I'm like, my cult taught that. Are you kidding? Like, just that connection. Like, you're just like, oh my gosh, they so many similar teachings and tactics. And I was just like, that was when I branched out and started the Cult Escape and Healing group on Facebook for anybody from any cult, basically, or controlling religion. And I think that it's a great resource. It's got, and then it's also a place where you can talk and post things, and you are within a community where, nobody's going to look at you like you have three eyes. Like they're going to be like, oh yes, I've been there. I understand where you're coming from. Because a lot of people will post in there and say, does this get easier? Because I'm so struggling. And it's so great to be able to tell them it does get better with time, I promise. Yes. I know it's hard right now. It's hard in the beginning, but it's so refreshing to be able to say, I promise it does get better. It takes time, but it does get better.
Oh my gosh. Well, that is so true. And so I want to also let folks know that I do offer a free online support group every week for people recovering from religious trauma. And what part of what you are describing is religious trauma. And of course, I'll remind folks my book, Divorcing Religion, a Memoir and Survival Handbook, that's available now. And also a few other names people might find very helpful when they're recovering from high demand groups and cults. Steve Hassan, Dr. Steve Hassan, Hassan, and Dr. Hassan came up with the BITE model, which is important and helpful for folks in recovery. Rick Allen Ross has an excellent website called culteducation.com. And I've had Rick on, he spoke at the first conference on religious trauma that I hosted. And so folks also can go to my YouTube channel, where I will be posting, of course, this episode of the podcast. All my podcast episodes go on there, as well as sessions from the conference on religious trauma and sessions from shameless sexuality, life after purity culture. And another helpful name in the cult recovery world, Dr. Janja Lalich, and it's Janja, Janja, and Lalich, Lalich. Dr. Lalich and Dr. Hassan both were involved in cults. One was a political cult, the other was a religious cult. And of course, Dr. Marlene Winnell, and her book is called Leaving the Fold. And Dr. Daryl Ray, and he is founder of Recovering from Religion. So those are just additional helpful resources for anybody who's watching or listening to us today. I'm so delighted and grateful that you joined me, Melody, and I'm looking forward to being a guest on Cultimatum soon. Oh,
thank you so much, Janice. And I will say, we talk about Dr. Hassan's BITE model often on the Cultimatum podcast. It is a lot of people that are on there bring him up and bring up that BITE model. Like, this is how I knew I was in a cult. Basically, excellent. Yes, it gives you that, that reference to look. Yes, exactly. To know what to look for. Very helpful. And it's good for people to hear it that may be thinking about joining a group that they're questioning too. So hopefully it might stop people. I'm sure it has stopped some people from joining, which would be another preferred goal, right? That somebody doesn't have to go through that trauma and they can learn from somebody else's experience. Yes. Oh, this has been so great. So I will make sure to list a number of your resources in the show notes when this episode airs. And thank you again just so much for joining me today. Thank you so much, Janice. It was great to meet you, and I look forward to having you on Cultimatum as well.
And thank you for tuning into the Divorcing Religion podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. It was a really interesting show. Take care, everyone, and we'll talk to you again soon.